Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Unity Manifest Podcast, or maybe a rare one. I don't know, but our guest today is Kara Goodwin, and she had reached out to me, and she looked like she would be a great guest and somebody to talk to. She is a podcaster and mentor. So thank you for coming on today.
Thanks for having me, Gary. I'm excited to talk to you.
So what got you into this?
It's funny when I look back where I'm like, you know, was I like this as a child? There was an awakening aspect to it as an adult, a few years, well, let's see, about 10 years ago now. But I've always been spiritually curious, but didn't grow up particularly religious, kind of in and out of church a little bit, but not like really ingrained into the community, the church community or anything. But then in my 20s and into my 30s, I definitely backed off of my spiritual curiosity. And the way that I see it when I look back is that I kind of felt that I had outgrown some of the beliefs that I had had growing up. And so it's really interesting from this, where I am now, to see how circular things
Mhm.
are. It's like the further I went out, the more my journey kind of brings me back to where I feel that I started, just naturally as a child. But I had a rather jolting awakening. It's been about 10 years ago, as I said, and my life just exploded. Um, it started with the death of my sister-in-law. She took her life. She'd been a very close friend of mine, and that really shook our family and really that in and of itself would have been something difficult to go through. But 3 weeks later, our dog died, and then a few weeks after that, my stepdad underwent surgery on his brain stem. So he'd had deteriorating health, and that culminated in that surgery. And then my mother-in-law was hit by a motorbike as she crossed the street. So she was in the hospital for quite a while. And then my stepmom ended up having a heart transplant and had rapidly deteriorating health right before that. And the heart transplant's what saved her. So all of that happened within a few months. And we were living actually in Italy. So we were not around our families. That added another layer of complication and heartache to everything because you couldn't really be with everybody as they're
Mhm.
very easily as they're undergoing everything. And that was just in my husband and my immediate family. We had other things going on with friends, a very, somebody who was close enough to us. He had been in our wedding, was diagnosed with a brain tumor that year. He passed away the next year. So it was just one of those times where I my foundation got rocked and I felt like anything at any moment could happen. You feel so fragile. And through that, I sought out meditation. It had been something that had been interesting to me for a long time because anytime I came across something interesting, like, oh, this person knows information before it happens, or this person can pick up on past lives, or whatever it was, those things still interested me. There was usually some underlying factor that they had a meditation practice. And then there was always news in the mainstream media about the benefits of meditation and how it can change your brainwave states and all of those types of things. And I had tried it, but not really gotten anywhere with it on my own. And when my life came crashing down, I was like, okay, I'm going to try this meditation thing. I'm going to really like put my back into it now because I just feel so insecure about
Mhm.
life. And so I found a teacher and I began like really taking it seriously. And so it was through meditation that I started to have more expansive experiences, but really I was looking in meditation for just comfort and to kind of get my nervous system under control, feel some security, be able to have a coping mechanism. So I wasn't really even consciously looking for, oh, I want to expand my I didn't even know what that would mean. I want to expand my consciousness. I want to tap into, you know, the geometry, foundational geometry of of the reality or anything like that. And all of that kind of came with time. And and pretty quickly, it got me a lot closer to my spirit, to my
Hmm.
soul. But that was a byproduct.
So, what do you think happened? Do you think that your all these events happened in your life as a result of your awakening, or do you think your awakening happened as a result of those events?
It's such a good question, and it's something that I've contemplated. And it's something I'm a little bit apprehensive about going too deep into because I don't want to feel responsibility for like the death of my sister-in-law, for example, and the suffering of family members. I don't want to feel like, oh, they had to go through that so I could awaken. I that would not be my choice for an awakening, you know.
Right.
But the fact that they happened so close together, and I think that there was a lot. I don't ever think that anything is one thing. I think that
Hmm.
there are a lot of layers and nuances and meaning to life. And so I think that, the bigger picture was they had their path, they had their challenges, and that was the primary. They went through what they needed to go through at a soul level. That was the primary reason they went through it. The fact that it happened so close together, you know, perhaps that was more for me, where it was, again, not that it is about me, but it's just the fact that it happened in such a quick succession does make me think like that was a jolt. It was a like grab you by the collars. Okay, enough with this, skating on the surface of life. You've had your fun, but that's not why you're here. And because it really did feel like life just, grabbed me and turned my attention. Like I'd been looking over at the sunset and it was like, no,
Hmm.
you are supposed to be paying attention to this over here. That's why you came. So how are we going to get her attention here? So I wonder, how I think that there is a very intricate, beautiful, masterful design to all of our lives. And so I think that there was some design there, but I think it was multi-layered and more than just about like getting my attention.
So, do you believe that this was all maybe the possibility, the result of a soul contract that you had with these other souls to help each other reach each individual state of, I don't know, consciousness or growth, whatever you would like to call it?
Yeah, I think that's one way to look at it. I also really do think that we're on multiple timelines. And so, they all had their choices or their, different ways that their lives could have come out as well. And so I don't know too much about the soul contract piece of it, but I
Mhm.
do think that, some of those things maybe weren't inevitable. They were things that could have happened a different way and did happen a different way on different timelines. I was just reflecting this morning. I had a dream about somebody who I was in a relationship with, like, what, 30 years ago or something, maybe not that long, 25, let's say. And probably the closest, and I've been married for 21, 22, 21 years. And but that was probably the closest I got to becoming engaged prior to when I actually did get engaged. And I still dream about this person, like not all the time, but it dropped in this morning about timelines. And I'm like, I think that there is another timeline where we did get engaged, we did get married, and we did kind of keep our relationship going. And so it's interesting to think about that and be like, because I think that there's a version of me, there's like
Mhm.
somebody who is maybe, I don't know, just a different version of myself who would think gosh, I dream about him so much. Am I supposed to be with him? Or, did I make a mistake? And that's really where I'm supposed to be. But I don't feel that way at all. I think that we get these glimpses, and especially if we really tune into our dreams and we're diligent, and I've been working with my dreams for years. And so if we're really like tapped in and making an effort to remember our dreams and to think, to contemplate our dreams and to see if there are messages and meaning, if there's meaning in there and things and patterns and repetition. Um, but I think that we can misunderstand some of those things and think, oh, that's the better version, or that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Whereas I just see it as there are a lot of different possibilities. There were a lot of choices that I made. I've lived in England and Italy for a few years too, and it was really hard to decide if or when to move back. And I remember, especially when I was living in England, where I was like, I don't know. I very easily could stay. I think I might just stay. And it was such a hard choice. And I remember saying, even after we moved back, where I was like, I really wish I could be in both. I really, really wish I could still be there and I could be here. And so I feel that we do that. That there is a version of me that didn't move and had kids there, and my kids are friends with my friends from England's kids. And but it doesn't mean that that's the better choice. It's just another version of what's happening. And so it's the same thing that I was reflecting on with this person that I dream about, not all the time, but regular. It's not unusual, and I don't think about him very much. So it's funny to me that he shows up in dreams sometimes. And then I was like, oh, I think there is a continuation happening that is still happening that I can tap into because my consciousness has expanded more and more and more. And things do get kind of blurry sometimes
Hmm.
where there's bleed through, whether that's from a past life, whether it's from a parallel life, whether it's somebody else's life that I pick up on. And so it doesn't, I try not to romanticize it of like, oh, I'm getting this signal I'm supposed to be doing, or I made a mistake. And it's like, no, that doesn't resonate with me,
Hmm.
but there are a lot of possibilities.
Yeah, I see that a lot with people where they receive some type of information or insight and they take it as a end all see all, like that's it. This is it. Not realizing that it's just one aspect of everything.
Yeah, right. That's how I take it. And so it's interesting. I really enjoy getting those glimpses. And for some people it might be, oh, it's just a dream, or
Hmm.
it's the imagination or whatever. I think that the imagination and dreams are very, very powerful aspects of who we are. They are ways that we connect with multidimensionality, with other dimensions, with other versions of ourselves and of life. But that was something that I had to embrace because I was I started my adult life in the corporate world for 15 years. I was doing IT things, doing IT sales, very entrenched in major, major corporations, very blue
Hmm.
chip corporations, doing very you know, mainstream work. And and so I really prioritized the left hemisphere brain thinking of that linearity and the analytics and the rationality. And part of my spiritual journey, my expansion has been embracing and understanding the value of the right hemisphere and really trying to nurture that part of myself. And there has definitely been an integration that's happened, but it's also taken a choice on my side to stop saying, now, is this true, or is it my imagination? And being like, oh, if I decide that it's just my imagination, then I devalue it.
Hmm.
And that kind of kept me cut off from being able to go further. And so that's been a learning for me too, is valuing what I dismissed for so long in the realm of imagination and dreams in order to provide valid information.
Just when I first started this podcast, it was called Everything Imaginable. And
Mm,
I based it sort of on the idea that if we can imagine it, we can make it real.
yes.
But now I kind of look at it differently.
Hmm.
Now I kind of look at everything as imagination, period. Because maybe
Yeah.
each of us is imagining our own reality. We're living in our own dream. We're creating it all. you know and when I ask those questions of like whether it's outside or inside, like the answer is always both, because there's this, I'm creating it, it's creating me. It's like a reflection.
I love that you bring this up, and especially with this being the Unity Manifest, the role of the imagination manifestation. I'm curious if you do any kind of like out of body stuff or lucid dreaming or anything like that and how that plays in.
Well, kind of like you, I started meditating a long time ago, and that was is useful. It's hard sometimes because I can't always focus when my mind is going crazy and stuck in 3D reality. But there are other ways of jarring the mind out. you know
Yeah.
there's so many modalities, things like binaural beats,
Yeah.
psychedelics, um,
Hmm.
different forms of guided meditation. Some people just use things like exercise, and going out into nature can jar you out of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's really fascinating. A couple of nights ago, I had my first, I had my first lucid dream. I'm calling it a lucid dream, an intentional lucid dream. I think I've had them before throughout life, but I just didn't understand what it was or have language for it. But I'd been wanting to have a lucid dream for a while and it hadn't happened. Um, but I listened to a guest that I was going to be interviewing last week, and they were talking about out of body experiences. And one of the tips that they gave to increase the likelihood of it happening is throughout your day, telling yourself, this is a dream. This is a dream. And to
Mm-hmm.
make that habit throughout your day of your waking life to say, this is a dream. This is a dream, because that stuff starts to seep into the dream realm. And I've been implementing that where I'm like, and he also said, take some time to like touch a wall and notice like that it's a barrier in this realm. Like, oh, okay, I'm putting my hand, because then you might find yourself in the dream putting your hand against a wall and you can put your hand through it. And then that can help to alert you, wait, this is a dream. And so it was really fascinating because I've heard other people talk about lucid dreaming. I've read books on it too. And one of the things that I've come across is that if you talk to the people in your dream, if you wake up from a dream, but you're still in the dream and you realize you're in a dream,
Mm-hmm.
tell the people, if you start talking to the people that you're in a dream and they're in your dream, they really don't like that and they get angry. And in my dream, when I realized what was happening, I was astounded. I was in wonder. I was so grateful. And I was grateful to all of the people in my dream that they had helped me to have this dream, because there were a lot of cars around, and they were all orange. All the cars were orange, and there were a lot of people. It was almost like a drive-in, kind of like a drive-in movie theater type of vibe. I
Mm-hmm.
don't remember there actually being a movie or anything, but it was that type of thing. We were all together kind of in a parking lot, and all the cars were orange, and then they all turned yellow. And so then while I'm in the dream and I'm waking up to it, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is a dream. And I'm like, oh, they were all sacral. Now they're solar, in terms of the chakra colors.
Uh-huh.
And I start extending gratitude to the people in my dream. So I wasn't even like accusing them. This is a dream. I figured it out. I was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. Look at all the symbolism that you did. And you put the chakra colors in here and they're changing. It's so cool. Thank you so much. And they got so sour with me, even being grateful, but saying that like, wow, that what an amazing dream you created. They didn't like it. And I didn't even expect them to like in my dream I hadn't connected. Oh, if you tell them that they're in a dream, they're not going to like it. Like that hadn't been part of it. I hadn't chosen. I was just saying, "Oh my God," and trying to be appreciative. But they still turned sour. They like were not meeting me with my gratitude. They were like annoyed that I was suggesting that they were dream characters, which I found really funny because I didn't really even think about that until later the next day. And I was like, oh my God, they didn't like it. And I've been told that that would happen. So it's funny, but it's interesting to me to see these kind of patterns not only within a person, like if you get used to lucid dreaming or out of body experiences, and then you keep seeing these patterns, perhaps like the characters don't like being called out for being part of a dream or having you suggest that they're part of a dream. But when it's happening to people outside, like in this realm, and you're talking to people and they're having those same types of experiences, that really makes you think about what dreams are, you know? I think that, and I'm not suggesting that you don't understand that, but just in terms of these different realms and the rules and the reality of it, it's really can make you think.
That's funny. Like, I never liked the term. I was it NPG or RPG people in our reality.
Oh,
Like,
NPCs?
and yeah, yeah. Like, I
Uh-huh.
never liked that term because, I think it's demeaning to people in a way.
Yeah.
And I guess they probably feel like that too when you pop up in your dream. You're like,
Yeah.
your dream.
Yeah, but if we think of them as parts of us, parts of our personality, archetypes, or however we look at it, but parts of our subconscious, you wouldn't think that they would be insulted and in a universal way, a bit, across the population. It's really, so it's just funny that that would be an unexpected kind of standard experience for different people.
I
I don't
think that's
know.
because we're like so limited in our perception of what we're able to perceive while we're inside an organism.
Yeah,
But when we leave, we see more. And I'm not saying we see it all either. I think
right.
even when we leave and have out of body experiences and stuff like that, we're still only seeing small pieces of it. And usually I think it's like compartmentalized because we can't conceive the whole thing at once.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, there are plenty of times, and I'm sure people who, I think the term download that gets used a
Mm-hmm.
lot these days, and I think it can mean different things to different people. But I know that there are times where I'll receive a lot of information, insight, symbols, um, solutions, but it will come really, really fast all at once. And so that's what that download means to me. It doesn't, when it happens to me, it doesn't necessarily feel like somebody else is like delivering it to me, but it's just almost like I'm tapping into something. And, but there can be so much that comes in so fast that I know I'm missing like 98% of it, just to your point of we have access to so much, but we have this brain and there are limitations within the brain and it can be so much to process that we can't process all of it so much or all of it all at once. And we have that even with our visual stimulus, right? Where I don't remember what the percentages are, but there's like different parts of our eyes that are taking in a certain amount of information from the environment. But what actually gets into our awareness is like, some small fraction of a percent of what we actually notice from the visual, you know, physical realm that doesn't even take into account what we're also hearing that we're not noticing or perceiving with our feeling senses, what changes in the breeze, changes in the light, things that we just that slip our attention. So we're just getting hit and bombarded a lot with a lot of different information, but it's hard for I think our brains are designed that way to filter out a lot of it so that we can focus on, I don't know, less. I suppose that's part of the design of being here.
I think so too. I do think that our minds are more of a filter for reality. So the filters are what makes it appear so real, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I remember coming across that actually years ago with, I think I was reading Dr. Larry, I can't remember what his last name is now, Dossie. I think that's it. And he's written several books, but one of them was the Power of Prayer, I think was what it was called. And there were all these studies done on prayer and the effects, and how effective it was and what made it more effective and all of this. And that was the first time that I had heard somebody talk about the idea of the brain as a receptor and a filter rather than the generator of our thoughts and our ideas. And I think that's got a lot more traction now, but that was like mind blowing for me. And he talked about just like you have a radio and you tune it to a certain frequency, and that's the channel that you hear, but that doesn't mean that that's the only music available, the only radio station that's available. All of that is in the atmosphere around you, and you can keep turning the dial in order to switch different stations, and that receiver will output different music based on what frequency it's set to. And it's the same with our brain, where our brain is tuned in a certain way, and we can even take that to the frequency, the vibration, because everything is vibration. And then we change our experience based on the frequency that we're tuned into. And that's related to our attitude and our diet and our media diet, our physical, food diet, our, lots and lots of different things play into what frequency our brain is tuned into. But that's what's actually creating it. Like it's like all the thoughts, for example, they're not being generated in our head. They're outside of us, so to speak, but we're tuning into them. We're tuning into these thoughts at any given time through the brain, which is, I found that just like mind blowing.
If that's the case, then what do you think the soul is?
Well,
If I'm just a receiver, like if I'm just a transistor radio or a device to receive information, does that mean I don't have a soul?
well, this is a great question because the way that I see it is that we have this eternal aspect of us. So we were talking about the brain, which is part of the physical makeup of who we are. And then we have this spirit aspect that is eternal and it is energetic and it is how the body was created from the energy of the soul. It's not that we have this body and then there's this soul that's inhabits it. It's the other way around. And we choose in our life how much soul we're going to bring in, how connected we are with this. So that's been part of my journey. And that's how I see it with my meditation practice. For example, it is deliberately bringing more and more of the energy, more of the soul, more of the higher self, however you want to think of it, into the body so that I am and commanding that. I open myself to all that I am and come in and take up space, fill up the subatomic on through, radiate through me, use me, and inhabit this realm. And I think that we have that choice that we can do that, but a lot of people on this planet are cut off and they're not doing that. They're living just at the physical level. And so they're more easily influenced by the collective consciousness, by this body of thought that is created through the collection of all of our thoughts, all of our words, all of our actions, we're contributing to the collective consciousness and we're influenced by it. And the less that we are inhabiting our body as a soul, the more influence we have from the collective consciousness, meaning we are more manipulated by the media, by peer pressure, by, expectations of our family, by all of that external stimulus. We are kind of tossed around and we allow ourselves to be told what to think, what to do, what to say, how to behave. The more that we are actively embodying soul and the energy, the true energy, the eternal energy that we are, the more that we are expressing and radiating the truth of who we really are. And then we are more influential in the collective. And so it's like, have you come across like Power versus Force, the book by Dr. Stephen Hawking? No. Is that right?
I don't know who wrote
Hawkins,
the book, but
David
I
Hawkins.
know the theory of what you're talking about. Because
Okay.
actually, my next question was going to be, you already answered. It was, are certain people here to influence the collective rather than be, influenced by
Influenced
the
by.
collective?
Yes, exactly. So I think it's Dr. David Hawking, but he talks about power versus force. And it's, the lower level of consciousness that you have, the less energy that you have that you're generating. And that is dictated by your attitude more or less. Are you walking around and the primary energy that you have is shame or anger or sadness or those kind of lower things? Well, then
Mm-hmm.
you're not emitting and very much energy, you're not transmitting very much energy, and you're basically just you're being tossed around by all the other energies. They're influencing you. The more that you bring in, the more energy you have access to. And again, there's are a lot of things that increase our vibration. This is all vibrational: meditation, prayer, cleansing, lots and lots of things. Exercise can help to elevate us. And there are a lot of different modalities. This isn't just like a do this one thing and you'll, get right up to enlightenment. But this culmination of choices that we make can help us to increase our vibration, bring in more energy, and it makes us more influential. So he did that work decades ago, but it is a lived experience as well, that the more energy that you bring in, the more you keep embodying the eternal nature, the soul, keep embodying more and more and more of the soul, the more influential we are in our worlds, in terms of, it's not even like, oh, you'll become an influencer in the way we use that word these days. It's not even about influencing the masses of people, like noticing it where, oh, if I say to buy this thing, then people buy this thing, or I wear this and then people wear this, or whatever it is. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's not that black and white. It A great sign of it is that you start to care less and less about what everybody else is doing, what they're talking about, how they feel. It's really about less influence of the outside affecting the stability of the inside, and more of the ability to find that center, even when there is so much chaos. And we're all getting, a lot of chaos right now from a lot of different directions. But the more that we're able to hold that, to remember who we really are as eternal beings, I mean, that in and of itself is gold. But then there's that collective, that energetic piece that is happening like below the level of the external environment. Again, where we may not see that people are quote unquote following us, that doesn't matter, but that we are actually energetically bringing more light, more love, more compassion, more wisdom. that we are choosing to connect to the collective consciousness. For me, this happens through meditation, but it is a choice to go into the
Hmm.
collective consciousness and to just be in a state of allowance and just feeling that I am radiating everything that I am and letting that just kind of light things up in the highest way and not being attached to it and letting it just be what it is. So it gets again back to that kind of imaginal space, that sort of, it's not so tangible, it's not so black and white. It's not like I can say I do this and then 2 hours later this happens. It's not. This is just the way that I work with my consciousness and how I understand it working in terms of the collective consciousness and those of us who are working to increase our vibration, if you want to think of it that way, to bring more of who we are in. But that, and going back to that soul piece, what if we have this human brain and it's a receptor and we're just receiving information? How does the soul play into that? It's like the soul absolutely does play into that, but we have this choice of how deeply we connect with it, how much we bring it in, how much we embody it and allow it to move through us. That is part of our work here as humans, that a lot of people, it's hidden from a lot of people and they're not prioritizing that. And so they are more or less automons, where they're just, okay, collective, what do I do now? What do I think now? How do I behave now? What am I worried about? Who do I like? Who do I hate? Who's the enemy? And they're just pulled around by that. And they're not coming in and they're not living from the truth of who they really are. And they're not fully experiencing themselves as a sovereign being, in my opinion.
It is part of their journey, right? They have to go through through that level. I don't even like the word level. I don't like the idea of one person being above another, or a higher frequency, a lower frequency. I try to avoid those particular types of terms, but I mean, they are in that certain place in their journey, I guess maybe would be,
Yeah,
in order to, they're building a foundation. There's
yeah,
there's a term I can use without
yeah.
insulting anyone.
Right. And I hear what you're saying in terms of higher, lower. I'm not using those in terms of competition or
Hmm.
better or worse, but there really is a vibratory component to how we, at the atomic level, there really is literally a higher vibration. If we're vibrating higher, we're bringing more information in. So we learned about this, at your basic science class that went through energy and wavelengths. And there are lower, slower vibrating, and you can see this in the color spectrum. Red is a
Hmm.
lower, slower wave. Violet is a much higher, more condensed wave. So if you have, let's say you've got 1 inch and you want to see a wavelength that is the distance of 1 inch. If it's a low, slow wave, you may have one wave in an inch. If it is a high vibration, you might get 100 waves in the same distance. That's information. That
Yes.
is energy. It is access to information, it is access to vital life force. So it's not about better or worse, but it is actually a measurement. It is how things work. So thank you for the clarification, because I'm not trying to degrade anybody or say one's better or worse, but you do get there, it is a thing. It's not like a better and worse. It just is. You're getting more
Hmm.
energy, more life force with a higher vibration. But in terms of, is it part of their path? It kind of goes back to the parallel timelines. I think that we all have versions of ourselves. I think that there is an enlightened version of myself, and there is a version that never really took the opportunity to wake up and is still kind of skating on the surface of reality. And there are in between versions. And I think that's true for everybody. I think that everybody has the potential to come more into embodying their soul. I think that I have the potential to embody more of my soul than what I am right now. Even though it is a priority for me, I think that there probably are things that I could be doing where I could have access to even more. And um, so I think that we, I don't think it's as black and white as like, oh, that person is they're asleep and they should be awake. They're
Right.
vibrating at this and they should be vibrating at this. Yes, they have a plan, they've got a path, and there are lots of different paths for them. And so at any given point, that light can come on and they can see the world in a different way and access different parts of themselves and kind of, you know, experience their consciousness in a different way. Um, so I think again, it goes back to that brilliant, masterful design, and it can meet us wherever we are, where we always have the opportunity to become a different version of ourselves.
So, how does all this stuff improve people's lives?
What a thoughtful question. And it goes back to how we started, where it's like sometimes we find that we learn all of these things at the mental level and our mind really understands it. And we go on this journey of like thinking that we're expanding our consciousness, and we're having better experiences. And we find that we keep coming back to things that were important to us before, or like, oh, I kind of had it right all along. I feel like this with conspiracies. I am very open to a lot of the theories, and a lot of them these days aren't really theories. They've been proven, but for a long time, they were theories. But I feel like this happens if you really dive into that awakening realm, because there are different ways that people awaken. But I feel like, and I've experienced this, where I'll learn more and more about what really has happened and what really is happening behind the scenes. And it gets dark and it gets constricting, and you start to feel suffocated, like, oh my God, the deck is stacked against us. How in the world? Like, there's no way out of this. And you just start to feel helpless. And eventually it's kind of like, you know what? It's not that I'm saying that that's wrong. I think that it is correct. I think I've seen enough evidence to know that a lot of that stuff is correct. And I got to go back to just living in the now and seeing what's in front of me. And so there's that. It's this circle, but it's actually a spiral. It's like you kind of come back to
Hmm.
where you had been, to familiar territory, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go back, but you're at a different level. And again, not better or worse, but you know more. You can't unknow what you know, but you just choose, like, okay, that's really interesting. I'm gonna like kind of let that be part of my foundation now, and my subconscious and so forth, but I'm not gonna keep living like with it front and center and being reactive to everything and being controlled by that narrative, those narratives that are also fear-based and so forth. So that's just one example, but I've also just had, like I said in the start, where I start to see things the way that I saw them as a child, understand things the way that I understood them as a child. And I'm like, oh my God, I searched and I did all of these things to try to understand more and more. And then I find what I thought when I was 4 is so close to what I think at 47, And there's a lot of growth in there. There's a lot of understanding. There's a lot of um, really interesting connections that are made and so forth. So it's so worth it. And it also comes back to, hey, I'm a living human on this planet. I want to make this life worthwhile. I want to connect with people. I want to enjoy my life. And so you do kind of come back to brass tacks, as you're through the evolution. It can feel like this, return a lot of times. I've found that so many times. Have you found that as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Just in observing the collective and inside my own self. And it's even a pattern you see in the stars.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. That's a wonderful way to, that's a wonderful observation.
Yeah. Well, science also talks about it too, like the Fibonacci sequence and things like
Yes.
that. Like nature definitely has its own pattern. That's one of the things I like about sacred geometry and things like that, because if everything is a pattern, like you mentioned before, patterns are wavelengths. So the
Yes.
colors, the lights, everything that we're experiencing that we think is a solid reality is nothing but waves.
Yes, exactly. I love that you brought sacred geometry into it. I love sacred geometry, and I hadn't drawn any for a while. And this
I
weekend,
noticed it behind you too.
yeah, I've got the Metatron's cube
Yeah.
behind me, but I was drawing the Tesseract this weekend and coloring it as well. So it was like really kind of getting into the color, the shape, that's a higher dimensional geometry that doesn't, you can't actually like make a three-dimensional tesseract it
Hmm.
because it's like these inner locking cubes. And but gosh, it's such a beautiful, powerful, mysterious geometry. And I had found myself like in this mode of, okay, I want to draw, I want to get my colors out, I want to engage with it, but I need to do these things. I need to clear out this stuff first. And I was in this holding pattern of like, okay, but I just need to clear. Once I get this stuff done, then I'll treat myself. And I was in this like loop of just everything just keeps showing up, right? And then finally I was like, this weekend, I was like, enough. Just do it. You love it. You love it. But it's like I have to get the supplies out. I've got to do, all of this stuff. And so there was a part of me that was like dragging my feet to do it, to like get to where I could do it. And then I was like, once you start doing it, you're going to love it. And then, of course, I was like having a ball with it. But I love that you just bring it up. And it's been this thing that showed up in my life in the last few days.
Yeah, yeah. It's even in like we are like DNA.
Hmm.
I mean, it's a shape that can holds all the information of who and what we are. In
Yes,
the end, really, that's all we are is information.
right.
And when we jump timelines and dream and all those things, it's just information.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Do you think that the more people become aware and the more that people expand their consciousness, um, that it will bring about an enlightened society or some type of extension?
I do think that I probably think it will happen slower than a lot of people say it will. I know that there are a lot of people who are really seeing a massive jump in the next few years. I think we will see a huge jump, but I don't know that it will necessarily be enlightenment or what we would call enlightenment or ascension. I just don't know, like going back to when we were talking about downloads and
Mm-hmm.
how it can just be like so much all at once that I know I'm getting profound insights and profound visions and so much profundity. And I know I'm only able to like consciously be aware of a small fraction of what I'm actually receiving. And I think that with where the mainstream is right now, it would take such a massive, massive leap to really get to that jump of where we would consider actual enlightenment. I mean, I don't know. There's a show on Apple right now called Pluribus, and that I think is what it would take for us to have some sort of enlightened leap. And that is basically like everyone just shuts down for a period of time. They're like shaking and convulsing. And when they come back, they are completely different. Like their personality, like whatever personality they had before was gone. And that happens like more or less in in a, just a very short time. But they're unrecognizable in terms of, and they are, like, you could say they're enlightened, they're telepathic, they're, caring, they're nonviolent, they're compassionate, loving, um, but they aren't themselves anymore. So that, like, human factor is gone. Um, they have their memories, but I don't see it happening like that. I think it's still going to take some generations to really kind of get to that higher level. But I absolutely think that it will happen. It is happening. We're in the very beginning of it.
Do you think like this process is just a part of us returning back to the singularity consciousness?
I do. I do. I think that we have a lot of different, not only like the versions of ourselves that we've talked about that are this human on different timelines, different potentialities, but I think that each of us also has other lives, some that we've had on this planet at different times. So some that are in the future, some that are in the past, but also in different places. Different, we're connected to, let's say, a version of us that's on a different planet or star system, even. Um, and I think all of that together is part of that returning to the singularity. I think that's a massive, massive, um, creative level of everything returning back to that singularity. I think that humans are a part of that, absolutely. And this evolution of consciousness that we're experiencing is absolutely part of it. But I think it goes way beyond the human species and even life
Oh
on
yeah,
Earth.
yeah, definitely. How about channeling? Have you ever channeled? What do you think it is? Like, because I know you've received downloads, and like they're kind of similar. Like,
Yeah.
like the information just pops into your head. Channeling, I guess, is a little bit different because you can ask and receive.
Yes. So my understanding and relationship with channeling is changing. I always thought of it as like some entity comes into you, then you either go somewhere else, like in trance channeling, and you can maybe observe it or maybe you're not aware of it. Um, I'm understanding it more and more now as just this openness, and maybe different parts of us are able to come in. Um, I don't it's a really interesting question. I lead meditations regularly, and there are definitely times where I can feel a shift within myself of, like, I'm still there, but it's a shift. Like there's a different part of me that is coming in, and it's interesting because I can kind of toggle between them.
Mhm.
So I think that that could be considered channeling, but I don't feel that another entity has come in or another being has come in. It's just this, like, I don't even know how to explain it better than that, but I'm still in control. I'm still aware of what I'm saying, but there is this shift inside that happens, and it doesn't happen every time. And I can, like, feel when it happens, and then I can kind of come back in. And um, so I have perceived beings in lucid states, in the hypnagogic state, as I'm traversing consciousness. Sometimes I'll come encounter beings. A lot of times, what I encounter in those types of expanded states is geometry, color,
Mhm.
patterns, seeing a lot of moving patterns. Um, but sometimes I will see a being. Sometimes I will just see an energy that I know there is another being like that's part of that energy, but I can't see them in the same way that I can see the energy pattern. Um, but I often they're not, like, directly communing with me, or I'm not able to understand what it is that they're saying. Like, I'm not receiving the, like, English messages, where I'm like, oh, I'm seeing this thing and I'm receiving this information. But it could just be that what I'm focused on is trying to see them more clearly or trying to tune in more, so that, like, okay, let me see if I can make out, again, it goes back to limitations of what my
Hmm.
consciousness is able to perceive and notice in any given moment. But I do believe that people have the ability to channel and to connect. I I ask people to be aware that just because somebody is tapping into something, it doesn't mean that it's a higher level of intelligence. It doesn't mean that it is benevolent. Even if they're saying they're benevolent, I'm very aware of like the trickster aspect of all of this, all of the ways that we tap in and how we can
Hmm.
be tricked, how we can even be tricked within ourselves. Like we might tap directly into something, be told it's an angel, for example, and it's not. That's not always the case, but it can be the case. So, I think that people can be very quick to be like, oh, it's this non-human intelligence, so it knows more than me, so I'm going to do exactly what it says, or what they're saying is right, or whatever. And I don't think that's the point of it either. I think that it comes back to embodying as much of ourselves as we can and letting that be our anchor and not closing ourselves off to messages from that a channel might be getting or that we might be getting within ourselves, but holding it with a healthy neutrality to say, let me feel into this, let me not drop everything and do what's being advised here. Let me not, let me use my discernment, let me use my own empowerment, my own ability to intuit what's of the highest good right now. And so I think I think that if people are enamored with the whole channeling thing, can be easy to do, I would just encourage just like don't get carried away with it. Don't hand yourself over. Just, you know, have a healthy relationship with it and don't lose yourself.
Hmm. That's an interesting. I think when people channel, I do think they're probably accessing some higher version of or some version of themselves, higher or lower. I don't know.
Hmm.
Because in a way, we're all the same person in a weird way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about different aspects of ourselves as individuals, different
Mhm.
timelines, different
Yeah.
versions of ourselves, and from a collective body, we're all part of this collective human consciousness. We are all parts of the same body of the collective consciousness. So we are all, like we've talked about, we're contributing to it, we're receiving from it, but we are all connected. And so I'm with you 100%.
Awesome. So you are a great guest. And before we wrap it up, um, where can my listeners find you? And do you have anything that you would like to promote?
Well, thank you so much, Gary, for having me. I've loved this conversation. I can be found at karagoodwin.com. That's Kara with a K. I've got free resources on there, free meditations. I host summits kind of regularly. I don't have one coming up at the moment, but the recordings are available. I have a sacred geometry course on there. I've got a learn to meditate course. And then my podcast is Soul Elevation, and that you can find all the episodes on soulelevationpodcast.com. And I am an author, so you can read my book, which is Your Authentic Awakening, a guide to everyday spiritual living. I go into some of the multidimensional experiences that we've touched a little bit on today, but in it also has some practical advice of how to bring in more of the eternal nature of who you are, some everyday things that you can do to help to build that up within yourself.
Awesome. Well, I will put a link to your website in the notes of this episode, and I hope my listeners reach out to you, and I hope they check out your podcast. You've done a lot of episodes, like
Yeah,
over close to 400, right?
over 500.
Wow.
Yeah, getting close to 550. Yeah.
Yeah, I broke 600.
You did?
Yes.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It's been
That's
a
awesome.
learning experience for me. Have you learned a lot from your podcast?
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yeah, a lot from other people. That's what's so
Hmm.
nice is connecting to people and understanding where they're coming from and their experiences. It's so valuable. And then just learning so much about myself too as I go through it.
Me too. It's been a great experience. So thank you for being on. Hold on for one moment. I'm going to play the outro and we'll wrap it up.